This is a reminder that this episode will address various topics related to addiction, amongst other things, and we will have a reminder about multiple sclerosis. These may be sensitive to some of our viewers. Viewer discretion, as always, is advised. We remind you to please consult your doctor, your mental health professional, your outreach group, your sponsor, or specialist before adopting any change to your dietary, physical, and/or mental health regime. If you're looking for options with respect to mental health, contact SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, at 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. The service is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and is a confidential free information service for individuals and family members facing such stressors. Importantly, if you're feeling suicidal crisis or emotional distress and need to be put in touch with a crisis center, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. It's 1-800-273-8255, or go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. You can also text the word HOME to 741-741. Those resources are also available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And this would not be a disclaimer unless we talk about something that has been paramount in my mind and heart over the last 18 months and also the last 11 years, and that of the demyelination. The National MS Society is a collective of passionate individuals who want to do something about MS now, to move together towards a world free of multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is comprised of unpredictable and often disabling flare-ups of the central nervous system. Such flare-ups disrupt the flow of information within the brain and between the brain and the body. The National MS Society is the largest private funder of MS researchers in the world, investing more than $1 billion to date. MS stops people from moving, but the National MS Society exists to make sure that MS doesn't. To contact the National MS Society, please call 1-800-344-4867. Once again, 1-800-344-4867. Or go to their website, nationalmssociety.org. Also, a reminder that we are raising money for the National MS Society through A Venture to a Cure's fundraising page at rebrand.ly/A Venture to a Cure. This was a page that was created in conjunction with the Walk MS 2022 in Media, Pennsylvania back in early May. An incredible fundraiser, an incredible organization, and definitely worth me mentioning the organization because it's helped me and over to 1 million people in this country who have multiple sclerosis in so many ways. And we're definitely appreciative of that. And on that, let's begin. A coffee maker. The first sign of solace in the morning to start a day. What if I told you that there used to be a bottle of bourbon next to that coffee maker? And what if I told you that that bottle of bourbon used to get used in that cup of coffee on a regular basis? Not only by myself, by other members of this house as well. A sign of alcoholism? Indeed. A sign of codependency? Absolutely. Tonight, we talk about alcoholism and codependency because this is the venture forward. Good evening once again, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome to the Venture Forward. I am John Venturini, a recovering addict of overeating, obesity, alcoholism, and compulsive gambling, and it is an honor and pleasure to see all of you tonight on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. As we talk about two things we've talked about before on this show, but is worth talking about together, since one happens to be a foundational sort of addiction, foundational sort of mental health dilemma that causes the other. And we'll talk more about that in mere minutes. But before we get started, I wanted to talk about why we're talking about this now and not earlier this season. And I think it's because I'm coming up to a very important day next week. Next week, as we will talk about on Thursday night, I will be 3 years sober, which honestly is the longest stretch of sobriety that I've seen in this lifetime. And moreover, the longest stretch of sobriety that anyone in this family, outside of being medically told to don't drink anymore, has seen in their lifetime either. So it is a very important point and a very important milestone for me to cross. And I think in light of that, I start, as we say, rewinding the tape, and I start wondering, well, why was I drinking a lot in my 20s and 30s and early 40s? Why was that a thing when it wasn't a problem or wasn't even a thought when I was in high school? When I wasn't of legal age, it was never even a thought, well, I'm going to have a drink. It was an issue, I think, when I was getting around my mid-20s. And then it started just growing and growing and growing. So we'll talk about that in a minute or two. But let's see who wins the door prize. And that would be Sarah over on YouTube, who says, "Hi, JV." Sarah, good evening. Hope you are doing well. Also on YouTube, we have Laura, who says, "Hello," and waves. Laura, hi, how are you doing? Hope you're doing well. We got Rollo on YouTube, who says hello. Hello, Rollo, how are you? We got Matt Haas on the Awesome Wood Things and co-host of VF Talks saying hello on YouTube. Hello to you, my friend. We got Sammy Superstar on YouTube, who says, "Hey, JV." Hey, Sammy, I hope you're having a great evening. We got Cherie over in Australia, who says, "Hello, Venture Forward peeps," with an XO. Hello, Cherie. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a great morning. And Cherie says, "Woohoo" to the 3 years of sobriety. Thank you, Cherie. I appreciate that. It's been part of this story. Now, I will go one further and say that the reason why alcoholism, the reason why my addiction to the drug, so to speak, was a major problem is because of the caloric situation it put me through. The sort of situation where, yes, in my body, and doesn't necessarily mean for all bodies, it definitely metabolically paralyzed me. So first and foremost, it was definitely something that was under true scrutiny when I realized, oh wow, I'm 480 pounds, I gotta start doing something about it. I start doing something about it, but I'm drinking. Not really the best sort of area of attack, especially when you go 4 months into said diet and you've only lost 30 pounds when you have a lot more weight to lose, and you're used to losing weight a lot faster when you're that big. I was never that big, mind you, but there is an expectation. And drinking, one, for the empty calories, but two, what it's doing to my metabolism, not a good idea. Not a good idea at all. So from my perspective, it took a different meaning because of that. But moreover, as I said in the open, there was a bottle of bourbon next to the coffee maker. Who does that? Someone who is using something that is very dangerous, that is going to help shuffle something underneath the rug and not something that needs to be addressed right away? Yeah, that's the sort of person. That's the sort of people. That's why there was a bottle of bourbon next to the coffee maker. So yes, alcoholism and codependency, and dare I say co-addiction, have a lot of things in common. So let's get at it. And what I will say is, as I try my new little toy here, because, what are we without the ability to bring up graphics like this, is what we're going to do is we're going to do a language of letting go first and foremost. We're going to go through basically that piece of the story. Then we're going to talk about what co-addiction and codependency actually is. Then we're going to talk about a specific passage out of Daily Reflections, out of the book of the AA. We'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about when the realization was very well known in my mind that I had to do something about this. And then we'll go back to language of letting go to talk about enjoyment. And that is the rundown for this episode. This is episode 4.26 on May 24th, 2022. We are addressing alcoholism and codependency revisited. So let's start off with a passage out of language of letting go, because if we're not going to talk about anything in this hour, the thing that we need to keep in the back of our minds is balance. So this comes out of the December 21st entry in Melody Beattie's book, Language of Letting Go. Strive for balanced expectations of others. Strive for healthy tolerance. In the past, we have tolerated too much or too little. We may have expected too much or too little. We may swing from tolerating abuse, mistreatment, and deception to refusing to tolerate normal, human, imperfect behaviors from people. Although it's preferable not to remain in either extreme too long, that is how people change, mind you. Real people who struggle imperfectly toward better lives, improved relationships, and more effective relationship behaviors is actually how people do change, if you think about it. It's basically why I've been living the last 3 years. But if we are open to ourselves and to the recovery process, we will, at some time, begin another transition. It becomes time to move away from extremes and then towards balance. We can trust ourselves and the recovery process to bring us to a balanced place of tolerance, giving, understanding, and expectations of others and ourselves. We can each find our own path to balance as we begin and continue recovery. Today, I will practice acceptance with others and myself for the way we change. If I had to swing to the other extreme of a behavior, I will accept that as appropriate for a time. But I will make my goal one of the balanced tolerance and expectations of others and myself. And that is the language of letting go. Let's think about that for a second. When we talk about codependency, and we talk about the sort of rubric of why people gravitate to a codependent sort of behavior, there is definitely a lack of balance. It's always one extreme or the other. The middle is never obtained. Middle, what do you mean by middle? What do you mean by the thing that is not one extreme or the other? What do you mean by, as someone said to me once, what do you mean by fuzziness, fuzzy logic? It's either one or the other. Well, no, there is fuzziness. There is a great area in the middle that we need to gravitate to. It's about balance. And when we don't have that, we're always going to excess on one end or the other. That's a telltale sign that there is something really of a codependent nature going on underneath the covers, underneath the hood, for sure. So, balance is going to be a very important portion of this story. Before we continue, let's quickly go over a reminder on what codependency actually is. This is something we talked about a month and a half ago when we did our episode on codependency. But somewhere along the line, we learned to doubt our perception, discount our feelings, and overlook our needs. We look to others to tell us what to think, what to feel, and how to behave. Other people supplied us with information about who we were and should be. It became more important to be compliant or avoidant rather than to be authentic. And we adopted rigid beliefs about what should be. We believed that if we could just get it right, things would be okay. When we got it wrong, our sense of security and self-worth evaporated. And that comes out of Melody Beattie's book, Language of Letting Go. What we will also talk about in this hour There's 7 other books to think about when we talk about codependency and co-addiction, which has definitely been part of my learnings over the last 3 years. Let's talk about those. I didn't realize. Codependent no more. So you see a lot of the books on this list. Melody Beattie, definitely one of the premier authors when it comes to codependency. Codependent no more, definitely part of that. The Language of Letting Go and More Language of Letting Go, something that we cite on this show an awful lot. Definitely a good book to read. Not only the book itself, but the daily journal. So there is a workbook that goes with both of those books that talk about one passage a day from not only Language of Letting Go, the main book, but her other works as well. And then there's a place for you to take notes and for you to take mindful observations of what you're feeling and what you're thinking as you read through that, but also when you do that reflection as you do on a daily basis. Another book would be Janet Mentor's You're Not Crazy, You're Codependent. We've got Facing Codependency, what it is, where it comes from, how it sabotages our life. That's Peter Melody. We have the book for codependency, or Codependents Anonymous, or CODA. That is also a good book to have. Codependency for Dummies by Darlene Lancer. Prodependence, Moving Beyond Codependence by Dr. Robert Weiss. And then, lastly, The Road Back to Me, Healing and Recovering from Codependency, Addiction, Enabling and Low Self-Esteem by Elisa A. Romano. It is a good list of books to have. I will dare say, when we talk about the various addictions, the various things we have crossed on this show, codependency is the rubric of a lot of these things. Tonight we're talking about alcoholism. But we can easily tell a story when it comes to my overeating and obesity. We can easily tell a story when it comes to my compulsive gambling. It is a foundational sort of disorder that causes us to go down the road of addiction. Let's go to Maine for a second. Sherry asks a really good question. What is my favorite book? I would say without question it's Codependence. Language of Letting Go, rather. Codependency No More is a close second place, but Language of Letting Go is definitely the book I gravitate to. Not only the workbook, but the book itself. Not only Language of Letting Go, but More Language of Letting Go for sure. But it is a solid list. Let me bring back the graphic real quickly. In the sense that there you have 9 books on that list. I say 8, but that second one's really 2 books there. That you can gravitate to in trying to figure out why do we do this? Why did we go down those roads? Whether it was a learned behavior or something that was environmentally just there for us to feel comfortable with. And it's just the easier thing to do because we didn't know any better. It is definitely a good list of books to read. So great question, Sri. Thank you for asking it. Let's see. Might as well talk about CODA real quick. We talked about this about a month and a half ago, but it's worth rehashing. Codependency or Codependents Anonymous is basically it's sort of a support group much akin to what we know out of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, with a 12-step system, that sort of meeting, that sort of rubric. It basically avoids rigidly defining codependence and the understanding of codependence with CODA, as it continues to adapt over time. If you think about what our social mores have been in the last 40 years, and it's definitely in the last 2, that has changed. Part of the study of codependency or Codependents Anonymous is the 38-item Likert scale that Charles Whitfield created. That was part of the original pamphlet for CODA called What is Codependency? Is the Codependents Anonymous checklist. I think I might have that slide in here. If I don't, I will definitely put it in the comments for the YouTube portion of this presentation. When we think about the behaviors or the mindset of someone who is knee-deep in codependency, we think of 5 patterns. There's many more, but the 5 that gravitate to me and the 5 that are listed there are things like, I have difficulty identifying what I am feeling. So basically non-committal to what I'm actually feeling or being able to put into words or being comfortable and putting words around it. I judge what I think, say, or do harshly as never good enough. So being around people or places or things that basically belittle your opinion, that belittle your mindset, that belittle your way is definitely a warning sign. And if you rate yourself high with that sort of statement, you definitely have points towards being codependent. Again, it's a 38 item Likert scale. So thirdly would be I put aside my own interests in order to do what others want. That is definitely people pleasing and shuffling your own wants underneath the rug to the point where you don't know what your wants actually are. 4, I freely offer advice and direction to others without being asked. Because again, you feel like the only place you can do anything is just by helping mindlessly and without even being prompted for it. Which in certain situations, if it's an urgent sort of thing, yeah, it's prompted. But more times than not, there's really no need to be overstepping that. So it's something to keep a close eye on for sure. And lastly, at least for the list of 5 there, I use indirect or evasive communication to avoid conflict or confrontation. So again, being fearful of conflict, being fearful of confrontation, being fearful of indecision or just disagreement is definitely a warning sign towards that too. So, like I said, there is a long list of items that go with it. But if you have sort of opinions that make you feel like you have no sense of being able to have an opinion or quickly shuffling other people's wants and opinions and desires in front of yours and not having a say into anything, that is a viable concern. So that is definitely what codependency is all about. And that's what CODA, or Codependents Anonymous, helps many of its members work through in its meetings and through its books. We talk about codependency, a reminder about co-addiction. It's a very specific addiction that talks about the relationship between an individual and an addict. So I will say that if you are in a situation where you're dealing with someone who is knee-deep in alcoholism, knee-deep in overeating, obesity, knee-deep in smoking, knee-deep in narcotics, knee-deep in what have you, there is a chance where the needs certainly get shuffled. So specifically co-addiction is it depends on the needs of or control of another and placing a lower priority on one's own needs while being excessively preoccupied with the needs of others. For the 158th time, I'll say that when the airplane's cabin pressure goes out and the masks fall, it's not being able to cover yourself first, but covering the rest of the row. Whereas you are supposed to cover yourself first so you can breathe, and then you take care of the rest of the row. You're forgetting that you have to take care of yourself first. You have to keep that love and strength and wisdom inside first and foremost. If you can't do that, then what you're doing may be somewhat hampered, may not be sustainable, may come off of false pretenses. We can go through a long list of what those things are, but it has to start inside first before you could share it with anyone else. In fact, for an active co-addict, the decision to let go of an addict is not possible. Think about that. The decision to let go of an addict is not possible. Why? Because you're knee-deep in the co-addiction yourself. You're knee-deep in trying to help someone when more times than not, you're not being able to help yourself. When it becomes that much of a situation where you've lost that sense, it's time for you to do some homework. It's time for you to reflect. It's time for you to meditate. It's time for you to go see a therapist. It's time for you to get the help you need so you can help others, right? Now, let me explain this for a second. Before 2019, before I started doing what I did to make sure I can live some sort of a life, healthy, physically, mentally, what have you, I was very much someone who was a co-addict. I was someone that was drinking a lot. I was someone who was overeating a lot. I was someone who was closet eating in the back of a line of fast food place name here. because I wasn't getting any sort of satisfaction or satiation from anything else, or the dopamine drip of the addictions in question were too overpowering for me to think of anything outside of that. And we can easily transcend that conversation from alcoholism to gambling to overeating. For me, the three are paramount. Underneath it all, codependency. Underneath it all, co-addiction. So it definitely is a foundational sort of complex, foundational sort of mental neurosis that goes with the three addictions, or any addictions you may have. We sometimes refer to people as having cross addictions. I've heard it called joint addictions before, in the sense that they're not addicted to just one thing. They're addicted to many things, or they're addicted to one thing and they might have gotten one up on that, but then that addiction moves to something else. That's when we start talking about firefighters, right? Not to bring that term back up. But what's really going on is they're not addressing the thing that's going on underneath it. Could I absolutely explain why I was going through these sort of things? Can I absolutely explain why I was drinking? Can I explain why I was overeating? Can I explain why I was gambling? Spending a lot of time doing that? To say it's a learned behavior is not telling the entire tale. I think I was using that to address things that could not be addressed without confrontation. Sometimes more than not, the object of that confrontation was also doing the same thing without going into so many words. When we find ourselves trying to be more of a people pleaser, or when people are trying to be a people pleaser to try to, basically satisfy our addictions, it's just not healthy. Let's take it out of the couple unit for a second. Let's go to the family unit. How many times have we talked about in this show about the Cartman drama triangle? In that sense of doing something and going above and beyond because, quote unquote, that person is my brother, sister. Enter family member name there, right? Whatever it is. When we lost sense of what we are trying to do for ourselves, when we've lost our way. Not healthy, and can lead to absolute utter destruction. If not physically, well, definitely mentally. I've definitely bear witness to that an awful lot in this story. I bear witness a lot in this life. And it's just a matter of one being strong enough saying, I've had enough, I gotta get help, and I gotta have a better handle of this all. Some comments. Shree says, the readings for Language of Letting Go always speaks to me. Definitely. Great book for sure. Going about the airplane mask, cabin pressure, great analogy. Yeah, I use that an awful lot. I think it's the best analogy I can use to talk about that importance of trying to stay strong for yourself and then being able to share your wisdom and love to others once you have ascertained that for yourself. Shree says, avoidance and escape. When we talk about the Cartman drama triangle and that sort of nasty sort of arrangement of the multiple members of said triangle. And of course, within all of that, denial. Thank you, Sheree. I appreciate you saying all that. Spot on, for sure. I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but I did keep the slide from the time we talked about codependency on the show about a month and a half ago. Just a peek at the Spann-Fischer codependent scale. I'll warn you in advance, just like it was 6 weeks ago, you'll need a magnifying glass to see all this. But basically, something like these sort of things to think about. Well, is it hard for me to make decisions? Is it hard for me to say no? Is it hard for me to accept compliments graciously? Sometimes I almost feel bored or empty if I don't have problems to focus on. When I do something nice for myself, I usually feel guilty. In reverse, usually do not do things for other people that they can do for themselves, right? So basically asserting yourselves when you're not even being asked. Telling myself that things will get better when the people in my life change what they are doing. So, honestly, it's something that me begging and pleading with certain members to go see therapy and they're not doing it in itself is co-addiction. Now, isn't it? It's codependency for sure. I seem to have relationships where I'm always there for them, but they are rarely there for me. So again, this is the sort of thing where it's on a Likert scale. So I think it's a 6-point Likert scale for each of them. Sometimes I get focused on one person to the extent of neglecting other relationships and responsibilities. That's the mask theory in great detail, isn't it? I seem to get into relationships that are too painful for me. Basically over assuming the nature of the relationship. Now, this is, needless to say, do we need to challenge ourselves? Yeah, from time to time. Not when it comes to that. Not when it comes to that. I don't usually let others see the real me. So when we can go into a world where we are WYSIWYG, remember that term WYSIWYG? What you see is what you get. When we can get into a world where we are basically as transparent can be, we have simplified ourselves. We have simplified our way of thinking, and we feel a lot more free. And when we're a lot more free, we can be our absolute honest self. And we know that we can love and treat our respect for ourselves first before we do for anyone else. When someone upsets me, I will hold it in for a long time, but occasionally I explode. I say explode like Mount St. Helens or any sort of large volcano. I've done that an awful lot. I will usually go to any lengths to avoid open conflict. It goes back to that sort of fear of just having an open and honest conversation about a disagreement. We're afraid of conflict. I often have a sense of dread or impending doom. So there's no happiness. There is no sort of normal moment where you can feel at ease. You always feel like something's going to happen, or no matter what happens, it could be the most pleasant day. It could be, I'll give you another analogy here. It could be a day with the most pristine blue sky with not a cloud that could be found. And you might have a problem with the humidity. Or you may have a problem with something and not taking a long, loving look at the things that are going so well on such a pristine blue sky day. And you're always afraid that, it may rain in a second because it's too humid. Thunderstorms are going to roll in. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Take in the moment. Live in the moment. Live in the present. Enjoy the present. Don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about the next second. Think about now. You have now. And only, as we said before, learn from the past, but never dwell upon the past. We have this moment. That's why it's called the present, right? So the moment we can get rid of that dread or that impending doom and live for now, we could think about things about the present with a lot clearer lens. We could think about the present with a lot more ammunition to take care of the moment that's right in front of us at this second. We think about the could be's or what could be or what could have been. Nothing gets arranged out of hypotheticals. Is it good strategy? Not really. If we can't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of the actual moment, it doesn't do us that good, does it? So we have to have a better sense of right now and not have that sense of impending doom. You'll find that if you're feeling more sick than not about these sort of things, when you can't think about anything positively, you're now probably making stuff up in the back of your mind, and that in itself can be something that is just very toxic, for sure. And then the last one, I often put the needs of others ahead of my own. So I referred to it before as shuffling things underneath the rug, when they should be tackled straight on. Going back to Maine for a second. When I think about that, I think about the amount of times I've been around situations where those 16 facets were definitely playing a role in this life. And nothing good can be out of that. Nothing good can come out of any of that. But if we live in the moment, live in the present, and take care of ourselves and what we're feeling, we are definitely better off. It would be remiss not to talk about the steps real quickly, because we think about the steps that we took to overcome alcoholism and the other addictions. Well, when we think about the sort of steps that we needed to do to overcome alcoholism, we have to think about also the codependency that is going on underneath it. So let's talk about that. And again, Coda has its own sense of the 12 steps. For this is the generalized 12 steps, but basically admitting that you're powerless over the addiction. For step 1, came to the belief that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. For step 2, turn our will and our lives over to the care of the universe as we understand it. 3, 4, the inventory, the searching and fearless inventory of ourselves, and so on and so forth. The steps become a very important hallmark to what we're trying to overcome, but also understanding where our place in this is, especially when there's amends that need to be made when we talk about step 9, and then also the ongoing inventory in 10 and whatnot. These are important pieces to this, of course. Spend about 5 minutes on Alcoholics Anonymous for a second, because we think about the things we're fighting with codependency, and we think about the alcoholism. It's worth mentioning this. AA is been around a long time. It's an international mutual aid fellowship dedicated to abstinence-based recovery. There's the 12 traditions in addition to the 12 steps. I would find that most recovery groups basically resonate to the steps to some sort of degree. But you think about the 12-step model, you think of the book as Bill W. would intend it, and how it basically lends itself to other compulsion and addiction-based groups. Gamblers Anonymous, GA. Overeaters Anonymous, OA. Narcotics Anonymous, NA. Al-Anon, even CODA. We go to 2020, it's definitely spread to diverse cultures, geopolitical areas, and the worldwide membership is to be over 2 million, with 75% of the 2 million based in the United States and Canada. Those numbers can probably be updated, as I think a lot of people have gravitated to groups like Alcoholics Anonymous in what we've been dealing with the last 2 years. So those numbers definitely have gone up, especially when doors opened up again. But I'll say even virtually, the work of groups have been very important. Most of you in this room, I have gotten to know you through recovery groups, and how important those groups were back as little as 2 years ago. When you're in a stage yellow or stage red and you can't leave your house, you can't go more than a quarter mile past the house because, of the thing that we don't talk about. How are you going to go to that sort of outreach? How are you going to go to meetings? Well, you go virtually. You go to Zoom, you go to Discord, you go to what have you. You find a well-organized group to help you through that. I'll mention the 3 I mentioned before, in that of Recovering Addict. I'll mention Sober James. I'll mention Real Recovery with Nicole, and a slew of whole other groups that have been there for me and been there for many. It's a small world, but we're fighting a lot of the same problems. And these groups are definitely something that we can gravitate to for us to get ourselves closer to a cleaner life, a more recovered life, for sure. The 12 question list about is AA for you? We can go through it real quickly. We think we used to know what these answers were when we were knee deep in our addiction. I know what the answers were for me when I was staring at that bottle of Knob Creek next to the coffee maker. But have you ever decided to stop drinking for a week or so, but only lasted a couple days? Yeah. Do you wish people would mind their own business about your drinking, stop telling you what to do? Well, when things have become really bad, yeah, I will say one other thing. I think when I was overeating too much and I can't walk more than 5 or 10 feet, and yet I was still eating like there was no tomorrow and eating 5 or 6 meals of large amount, when someone did tell you something, it stung, but you kind of wish you didn't hear it. But I think deep down inside you hear it yourself. At least from an overeater's perspective, from an obese perspective. Have you ever switched from one kind of drink to another in the hope that this will keep you from getting drunk? Sort of like a reverse hair of the dog, I guess. I don't know. 4, have you ever had to have a drink upon awakening in the past year? So instead of that cup of coffee, having a drink instead? Do you envy people that can drink without getting into trouble? Or dare I say, do illegal things when drinking? Like, I don't know, driving, God forbid? Have you had problems connected with drinking during the past year? Has your drinking caused trouble at home? Did that trouble at home, was that codependency? Was that co-addiction? Because there's plenty of that going on. Do you ever try to get extra drinks at a party because you do not get enough? Or when someone was done with their drink and they look at you and say, hey, you want to finish this? You are definitely more than happy to take it on for them. In my story, you end up wrecking a hotel room in Manhattan due to that. But it's a long story. That's when you know you have a problem. Do you tell yourself you can stop drinking anytime you want to, even though you keep getting drunk when you don't mean to? Have you missed days of work or school because of drinking? Do you get blackouts? Or 12, and 12, have you felt that your life would be better if you did not drink? I know my life would definitely be a lot better and I wouldn't get into as much trouble physically or mentally if I didn't drink, for sure. Let's go to Maine for a second. As I was going through the list, I see that Geesh has joined us on YouTube, who prays and also waves as I was going through the list. Good to see you tonight, Geesh. Hope you're doing well. I think in light of talking about those questions and the 12 steps, let's go to the book of Alcoholics Anonymous for a second, go into daily reflections for May 20th. One day at a time. Above all, as it says as Bill sees it in page 11 of As Bill Sees It, above all, take it one day at a time. One day at a time. Who do I kid myself that I must stay away from a drink for only one day, when I know perfectly well I must never drink again if I live? I am not kidding myself because one day at a time is probably the only way I can reach the long-range objective of staying sober. If I determine that I shall never drink again if I live, I set myself up. How can I be sure I won't drink when I have no idea what the future may hold? On a day-at-a-time basis, I am confident I can stay away from a drink for one day. So I set out with confidence. At the end of the day, I have the reward of achievement. Achievement feels good, and you know what? That makes me want more. And that is a daily reflection. Celebrating our sobriety, celebrating our ability to go over the things that held us back. That is a victory. And we definitely want more of that. because we're putting ourselves into a better place. We're putting ourselves in a healthier place. So why wouldn't we want that? It was a great passage, for sure. So we talked about codependency. We talked about alcoholism. So let's think about right now what other sort of co-addictions, other sort of addictions, other sort of compulsions can basically be derived from codependency. Although codependency itself is not a diagnosis, it can interfere with a person's well-being, as we've talked to on this show many times. People with codependency are more likely to have low self-esteem and strong feelings of shame. Research has found that relationships between codependency and also the following conditions: depression, anxiety, borderline personality, dependent personality, eating and food issues, alcoholism, you name it, it's in the list. And we think good therapy for that list and for this sort of summation of this. If you think about the different addictions that are on this list, and you think about the underarching thing that's going on, between the covers of all that, you have to ask yourself, what am I avoiding? What am I not taking care of that I'm quickly taking care of with something that's going to just get me into a deeper world of pain, whether mentally or physically? You look at that list and you see how depression and anxiety can definitely stem a lot of this behavior as well. There's something that's not being treated. When we think about depression and anxiety, what's the first thing we think of? Well, we think about the sort of work that we do with our ACWs and LCWs in therapy, or with our psychiatrists. To have that sort of regular check-in, that sort of work that we need to do to put ourselves in a better place is definitely important when we try to battle these things. So when we think about the nature of codependency and that people-pleasing ability, and then also co-addiction, when there's that shuffling because we're either fighting we're fighting for someone who has deep issues with compulsion, or they are dealing with our compulsions, or both, we have to be very well aware of these things and do the necessary things without question. So we've talked about many times before, the journaling piece, the meditation piece, the therapy piece, but being closer to ourselves. Making sure we have that sort of outlet for us to feel, outlets for us to observe and not absorb, outlets for us to live the best life we can. So we're not shuffling things under the rug. We're tackling it on in the best way we can. I'm trying to get my side panel working. I don't know why this thing wasn't working. I get a new toy over here and I couldn't get this thing to work correctly. Let's see. Did that work? Yeah, look at that. We talked about the long time mistake being fixed. We talked about the different story going on here. We talked about the daily reflections out of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, or basically a day at a time. So I think there's one thing left for us to do, and going back to the language of letting go and talking about enjoyment. May 23rd, in language of letting go. Enjoyment. Life is not to be endured. Life is to be enjoyed and embraced. The belief that we must square our shoulders and get through a meager, deprived existence for far-off rewards in heaven is a codependent belief. Yes, most of us still have times when life will be stressful and challenge our endurance skills. But in recovery, we're learning to live, to enjoy our life, and handle situations as they come. Our survival skills have served us well. They have gotten us through difficult times as children and adults. Our ability to freeze feelings, deny problems, deprive ourselves, and cope with stress has helped us get where we are today. But we're safe now. We're learning to do more than survive. We can let go of unhealthy survival behaviors. We're learning new, better ways to protect and care for ourselves. We're free to feel our feelings, identify and solve problems, and give ourselves the best. We're free to open up and come alive. Today, I will let go of my unhealthy endurance and survival skills. I will choose a new mode of living, one that allows me to be alive and enjoy the adventure. And that is the language of letting go. We have this one life. We have these moments. We have the present. Tomorrow is no guarantee, and we are not to dwell upon the past. We learn, but we don't dwell. If we remember that, we are putting ourselves in the best possible way of living the best life we can. And what I will say is, the one thing I can definitely be adamant about living the best life I can is the sobriety, is me losing the 300 plus pounds, 312, 314 as of this morning, and me not gambling as I deal with life as life will have it. Life on life's terms. The multiple sclerosis diagnosis was definitely something that opened my eyes. And the things that I'm doing is making sure I can live the best possible life I can. Skish says, amen. Amen for sure. I'm cheating a little bit. Thursday, we're going to talk about 3 years of sobriety. Now, technically, I won't be 3 years sober until Sunday. Or May 30th, rather. Yes, that is Sunday. But we're going to talk about it on Thursday night. We're going to talk about why drinking was so much a thing for me between my mid-20s and up to my early 40s. We're going to talk about why it was something that I had a quick handle on and then quickly gave that up. And it wasn't until me trying to fix everything else going on in this life that it started to stick. And it was definitely because of the help of recovery groups, but also me being open and willing to fix myself mentally as well as physically. As I told many people before, if you want to try to figure out why you're dealing with these sort of things, the best thing you can start to do is go upstairs. Figure out why that's the case. Be open and honest with yourself. No one's going to judge you for being open and honest with yourself. If you're journaling in a book, the only person that's seeing that book is you. If you want to set that piece of paper on fire when you're done, go ahead. One will tell you that you're probably just letting the good spirits of that into the universe. So do whatever you're going to do to feel right about it. Be open and honest with yourself. You'll find that a lot of things start working really well afterwards. So Thursday night, we're going to talk about that. And then Friday, we're going to do what we normally do on Fridays. Have a conversation about anything and everything with Matt Haas, Paul Burke, and all of you. It is the time of the week I look forward to the most. A chance to just have a conversation about any possible thing and just hang out with all of you. And I look forward to that each and every week. Thursday night's episode, 3 Years Sober, will be at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. VF Talks will be Friday night at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific. But until then, I'm going to say the same thing I say at the end of every Venture Forward in VF Talks. Stay safe, stay sane, stay strong, stay sober. You're worth it. We'll see you Thursday night for the next episode of the Venture Forward at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 Pacific. Have a wonderful night. Take care of yourselves. I love you all. And fly, be free.